This book is very impactful, especially if you are tired and fatigued by the insanity of modern plutocratic, relativistic, consumerist society. It grants you wisdom of what can and should be a normal approach to life. So if you want a brief overview of this beautiful work, stay tuned. Welcome to biblioCultist, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, comment on the video, and also check out my X, which I will put on the bottom here, and my Ko-Fi account where you can tip me once or recurringly, whatever you think is best. And I have the link to my merch store. And doing all these things really helps out the channel, and I appreciate it. I have to always mention these things because it's important to grow the channel little by little so that more people can be exposed to the content. And since out there in YouTube you have a lot of entertainment content that is somewhat devoid of educational importance, folks like us that love books and knowledge and thinking about these things should actually increase in visibility. If we continue to only support channels that give you superficial, low IQ entertainment, then our society will continue spiraling down into the abyss. Whereas if we see channels out there that do their best to increase the level of discourse, that encourage people to read books and discuss theology and philosophy and these things, then I think we can actually do something to improve the general quality of life, at least from an intellectual point of view, from a spiritual point of view. And a lot of people would tell me, if you do a channel about plunging yourself headfirst into a huge pool made out of tequila, you'll get 1 million subscribers. But if you do a channel about books, who the hell is going to watch it? And I decided I was going to do it anyway, even if I don't get the 1 million subscribers right away. I still think this is the kind of content that should be out there more often. And it's not only me, there's plenty of other people that do great content that we should support them as well. So all of you that put your time out there to discuss books or intellectual topics or religion, theology, all these people, we should be supportive, and it should become a cultural thing that we expect channels to dedicate time to higher topics. And there's a space also for the naked guy running in the woods with a camera screaming about the apocalypse. I don't mind that either. That's fine. It may not be for me, but there's always space for everything in life. But we should focus a lot more on those things that elevate the culture. So just wanted to give that side note there because I think it's important. In this episode, I'm going over the illustrated Walden or Life in the Woods by Henry David Thoreau. And this edition is from Fall River Press, 2017. You'll find this edition actually all over the place. If you go to bookstores, they sell them actually pretty cheap, and they're actually very nice quality books. I tend to prefer the non-glossy pages because they're easier on the eyes, especially if you have a light on. You have this shine that makes it very annoying to read. But aside from that, it's a good edition. But if you can find another edition of Walden, there are going to be plenty out there. Get that and enjoy it. Content is king. And I want to start this review with a quote that I think kind of sets the stage for everything. And it's right at the beginning. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city you go into the desperate country, and have to console yourselves with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotype but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. There is no play in them, for this comes after work. but it is characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things. And actually, I think that quote is relevant to what I said at the beginning. Most of the content out there is like that. It's entertainment because when you come out of work and it's a miserable experience and you feel desperate in life, then the type of content you want to get is mindless. The stupidest thing you can find to distract you from reality. But I think all of you would agree that desperate things create more desperation. Even though the mind is asking for stupidity, for mindlessness, so as to somehow distract themselves from reality, the truth is that usually breeds depression. And if you can put yourself in a position in which you inject actual nutrients into your mind and soul, it will actually improve your life. It may not seem so right away, but it actually will. Now, this book is a call to nature, to live in nature as God intended, away from artificial existence that you find in cities or urban areas. And it's actually very prophetic, and the current power of it is undeniable. When you read the book, you see that this problem has been around for a while, and that your desire to somehow get away from it all is actually a natural instinct. What is unnatural is to live packed in an urban setting and to suffer the consequences of living in that fashion. Another thing that I was actually in wonderment to read as I went through the book is the fact that Thoreau mentions the Bhagavad Gita. And the way he mentions it is fascinating because he says that the Bhagavad Gita has more value and wonder than all the ruins of the East. That elevated cultural productions that stem from the heart and the mind are higher than those made out of stone. And I actually disagree with this idea. I don't like seeing things in that dialectical form, since marble and polished stones and these things are actually a reflection of the spirit as well. That's how civilization used to communicate. I understand the point, though, that immaterial things are more powerful than material things. So I get the idea. A good book is more of a monument to a culture than a stone pillar. I get it. But at the same time, the material products of a civilization tell you a lot about it. If they're beautiful, if they exalt the soul and existence and the human search for the truth, then these stones have a lot of value. But maybe it's because I'm partial to archaeology and religious monuments in particular that I have a soft spot for it. Now, this book has an entire section on reading itself. So for those of you that are bibliophiles as well, that's going to be the most interesting. And I want to quote a little bit from it because I think it's very significant. Quote, "To read well, that is, to read true books in a true spirit, is a noble exercise, and one that will task the reader more than any exercise which the customs of the day esteem. It requires a training such as the athletes underwent, the steady intention almost of the whole life to this subject. Books must be read as deliberately and reservedly as they were written. It is not enough even to be able to speak the language of that nation by which they are written, for there is a memorable interval between the spoken and the written language, the language heard and the language read." And the other piece here would be a little bit further down, quote, "Most men have learned to read to serve a paltry convenience, as they have learned to cipher in order to keep accounts and not be cheated in trade. But of reading as a noble intellectual exercise, they know little or nothing. Yet this only is reading, in a high sense, not that which lulls us as a luxury and suffers the nobler faculties to sleep the while, but what we have to stand on tiptoe to read and devote our most alert and wakeful hours to." And obviously here, Thoreau is saying something very important. One of them is the distinction between hearing a language and reading a language, which is indeed very different from each other. As a matter of fact, there are different parts of the brain that are actually engaged when you read a language than when you hear a language. So the act of reading is very special because it is a form of meditation. You are literally taking a moment in the quiet, or at least in your own mind, in which you are reflecting upon a text that as you go through it, you go at a pace that fits your mentality, your spirit, and you digest information, you reflect upon it, and that pace is actually a form of trance. This is why usually when I'm reading and people are speaking to me, I sometimes don't even hear them because I'm immersed in the text. And that process is itself a form of spiritual engagement. And of course, the downfall of language, which is the point of the second quote I mentioned, that people are taught how to read so that they can read advertisements and engage in contracts, but not really to actually read. And it is a very sad state of things because it has brought reading down a lot of levels so that people read books in such a way that really they miss out almost 90% of the text because they think they're just reading an advertisement or some kind of promotion. So they're just trying to grab a few of the practical points, a few of the elements that seem to have a benefit, but they don't understand that the whole element of the text has meaning. And if it's a good writer, it will inject so much nuance into the information that if you don't focus, you miss the whole thing. Now, of all the chapters in the book, the one called Housewarming was my favorite, along with actually the conclusion, which is excellent. But the author's majestic use of language and what it points to is spectacular. So it's not only the technical aspect of the content, it's the beauty of the language itself. At the end of the day, the author is making a rhetorical argument in favor of a particular lifestyle. But the beauty of the trip there is really the main gist of it all. He wants you to understand why it is best to be self-sufficient, to live closer to nature, etc. And as a person that has inhabited so many pages of Puranas and Upanishads, which are wonderful texts and very entertaining and very enlightening when it comes to a lot of theological and philosophical insights, I was again further surprised that Thoreau would go back to it and again start quoting these things. So I want to give you an example of what I mean. Quote, "I sometimes expected the visitor who never comes. The Vishnu Purana says the householder is to remain at eventide in his courtyard as long as it takes to milk a cow, or longer if he pleases, to await the arrival of a guest. I often performed this duty of hospitality, waited long enough to milk a whole herd of cows, but did not see the man approaching from the town." Which of course it's kind of a tongue-in-cheek reference there to hospitality, but it's wonderful that he's bringing in such a great book as the Vishnu Purana. Another great quote that I also found to be beautiful and related to the same topic is the following one. Quote, "Thus it appears that the sweltering inhabitants of Charleston and New Orleans, of Madras and Bombay and Calcutta, drink at my well. In the morning I bathe my intellect in the stupendous and cosmogonal philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita, since whose composition years of the gods have elapsed, and in comparison with which our modern world and its literature seem puny and trivial. And I doubt if that philosophy is not to be referred to a previous state of existence. So remote is its sublimity from our conceptions. I lay down the book and go to my well for water. And lo, there I meet the servant of the Brahmin, priest of Brahma and Vishnu and Indra, who still sits in his temple on the Ganges reading the Vedas, or dwells at the roof of a tree with his crust and water jug." So again, awesome to see a classic like this mention such interesting and exotic books. Walden's poetic love of reality, the present, nature, the rhythm of nature, steps beyond naturalism into esoterica, into religiosity. And that to me obviously is very important because a lot of naturalism tends to lean on a form of hyper-materialism, but not in the case of this book, and to me that makes it special and also honest. And I want to close with the following quote: "Some are dining in our ears that we Americans, and moderns generally, are intellectual dwarves compared with the ancients, or even the Elizabethan man. But what is that to the purpose? A living dog is better than a dead lion. Shall a man go and hang himself because he belongs to the race of pygmies, and not be the biggest pygmy that he can? Let everyone mind his own business and endeavor to be what he was made." And that to me is a beautiful quote because it's realistic. One thing is to acknowledge greatness of the past. It's also important to acknowledge the faults of today. But at the end of the day, this is where we live, and therefore we have to do the best we can with what we have. So, yes, our forebears were much better. We have devolved for sure in many things. Obviously, in other aspects, we have evolved, theoretically speaking, at least technologically. But intellectually, I think it's fair to say we have devolved. But that doesn't mean that we should just give up and just fall into the trough and stick our snouts into the slop and enjoy away. I think that we have a responsibility to honor our forebears, but also to become worthy forebears to our children and our grandchildren. And that means that we have to dedicate time to these kinds of things, to improve ourselves, to read more books, to engage the knowledge, to engage each other in these topics. And that will make us, as a society, better. So again, this work elevates the spirit and it gives you a very clear, practical overview of at least something you could consider to do, to somehow find a way to live more naturally. If any of us can do that, I think we'll be happier. So hopefully you can derive some benefit from this review. Please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. Again, I appreciate you folks doing all these things. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.